Mara learned early that love could sound like a slammed door. Not the romantic kind of love people wrote about, the soft music, the gentle hands, the certainty. In her house, love and fear lived in the same rooms, and sometimes they wore the same face. Her parents were still together. Two bodies under one roof, two rings, two names on the same bills. People on the outside called it a good home because the lights stayed on and the lawn got trimmed and they showed up to church on Sundays with polite smiles. But the walls knew what the neighbors didn't. The walls knew the shouting that started small and grew teeth. The way her mother's voice would crack, pleading, then turn quiet like she was trying to disappear. The way her father would pace like a storm, looking for somewhere to land. The way Mara would count her breaths under her blanket, whispering numbers to keep her heartbeat from betraying her. By 12, she could tell how bad it was going to be by the way the front door closed. By 16, she had a plan. Get out, get safe, never let love be loud. Elias learned early that love could vanish. His parents did not stay long enough to leave an imprint that felt steady. His mother was sweet when she was sober, and cruel when she was not. His father was a shadow that came and went, leaving promises like empty bottles. Drugs took the house first, then they took the people. By the time Elias was 8, he had learned to make cereal with water when there was no milk. By 10, he could tell which adults were high by the way their eyes looked past him. By 12, he could keep secrets better than most grown men. Violence came next because drugs rarely traveled alone. One night, sirens screamed into his street and did not stop. His mother's friend was found in the yard. Then another night, his father didn't come home, and the next day Elias overheard the word dead before anyone tried to soften it. When his mother died, the story got told in pieces, like people were afraid the truth would cut them if they held it too long. Overdose. Elias did not cry at the funeral. He stood still, jaw clenched, eyes dry. Some people mistook that for strength. It wasn't strength. It was shock that finally settled into a kind of numbness. The foster system swallowed him in paperwork and polite lies. He grew up learning that temporary could last years, and family could mean strangers who didn't want you. He made 2 vows and treated them like scripture. Never need anyone. Never trust love. God watched them both. Not like a distant judge with a checklist, like a father who refuses to look away. He watched Mara learn to smile in public, while her stomach stayed tight. He watched Elias learn to be hard, so the world couldn't see he was bleeding. He watched both of them carry childhoods that had taught them the wrong lessons about love. And he began, quietly, to weave a thread neither of them could see. Mara was 29 when she moved to a new city for a job she told herself she didn't deserve. A nonprofit role, community outreach, counseling coordination, after-school programs. The kind of work that looked like paperwork, but was really about people who had been overlooked. She told herself she chose the job because she wanted to help. The truth was more complicated. Helping other people was safer than being helped. Fixing systems was easier than admitting she still flinched at raised voices. Being the calm one made her feel in control. She rented a small apartment above a bakery. The smell of warm bread in the mornings felt like a gentle promise. She kept her world small. Work, grocery store, church, home. She had friends, but she didn't let anyone too close. She dated occasionally, always choosing men who were polite, predictable, easy to leave. Her heart was a locked door. She kept the key hidden, even from herself. Elias was 31 when he got hired as a maintenance supervisor at a community center. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't pay enough for what the job demanded. But it was steady, and steady mattered more than money. He could fix anything: doors, lights, leaking pipes, broken chairs, even broken schedules. He liked repairs because repairs made sense. You found what was wrong, you corrected it, you moved on. People didn't work like that. People came with history. You couldn't tighten with a wrench. Elias lived alone, not because he hated people, but because he didn't want to owe anyone an explanation for the way he needed silence. He had one friend he trusted, an older man from church named Mr. Holland, who used to say things like, "God's not done with you." Elias always shrugged and replied, "We'll see." He wasn't angry at God exactly. He was wary. Because if God was real, why had his childhood been so brutal? Still, he showed up to church most Sundays. Not because he felt holy, because sitting in the back row, listening to songs about mercy, was the closest he ever got to believing his life might mean something beyond survival. They met on a Tuesday, a simple day, ordinary, the kind of day you don't expect heaven to interrupt. Mara arrived at the community center with a folder full of program plans and grant paperwork. The center was partnering with her nonprofit, and she had a meeting with the director about expanding services. The building smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. Kids' laughter echoed faintly from a gym down the hall. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a man carrying a long ladder. "Sorry," she said quickly, stepping back. The man steadied the ladder with one hand. He looked up. His eyes were tired. Not sleepy tired like someone who had lived through things he never asked for. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray work shirt with the name Elias stitched over the pocket. "You're good," he said. His voice was calm but guarded. Mara nodded and moved aside so he could pass. But as he walked by, she noticed something she didn't know how to name. He didn't look at her like a man trying to impress. He looked at her like someone who had learned that attention could be dangerous. It made her chest tighten in a way she didn't expect. "Have a good day," she said automatically. Elias paused, not because he needed to, because he heard something in her voice. Politeness on the surface, tension underneath. "You too," he replied. Then he kept walking. Neither of them knew that an angel stood in the hallway, watching a thread tighten. Not tugging, not forcing, just aligning. Over the next month, their paths crossed often. Mara came weekly for meetings, events, trainings. Elias was always in the background, fixing something, carrying something, adjusting something. He never made the center about himself. He didn't talk much. He moved with purpose. Mara noticed him more than she wanted to. Not because she was trying to fall for him. She didn't fall for people. Falling meant risk. But she kept seeing him in small moments. The way he knelt to tie a child's shoe without making a show of it. The way he spoke to teens like they were worthy of respect. The way he listened more than he talked. One day, she arrived and found the main room in chaos. A pipe had burst in the ceiling overnight, soaking the floor. Staff were frustrated. Programs were at risk. People were blaming each other. Elias stood in the middle of it, calm, directing cleanup with quiet authority. Mara watched him for a moment. Something about the way he moved reminded her of her mother, how her mother had tried to keep peace in a home that refused to be peaceful. Mara's chest tightened. A memory rose. Her mother wiping tears before church. Lipstick steady, smile forced. Mara looked away quickly, as if she could outrun her past. Elias caught the movement. He didn't ask questions, but his eyes softened slightly, like he recognized a familiar kind of retreat. Later that day, Mara found herself lingering near the doorway of the maintenance office where Elias was replacing a tool. She cleared her throat. "Hey," Elias looked up. "Hey. Thank you," she said, "for handling the pipe situation. You kept everybody calm." Elias shrugged. It was a pipe. Pipes don't get emotional. Mara laughed unexpectedly. It was small, but it was real. Elias blinked, like he hadn't expected that sound from her. Mara's smile faded into something gentler. "Still," she said, "thank you." Elias nodded once. "You're welcome." Mara turned to leave. Before she could, Elias spoke again. "Hey," he said. She turned back. "You okay?" he asked. The question was quiet, simple, not invasive. Mara's throat tightened. The truth was, she wasn't. Not always. But she had spent her whole life learning to say yes anyway. She forced a smile. I'm fine. Elias studied her for a second, then nodded as if he understood her language. Okay, he said. If you ever need, the quiet room is open. Mara didn't know what to say. She just nodded and walked away, heart beating too hard. In the hallway, she whispered under her breath, God, what is this? Heaven did not answer with thunder. It answered with timing. Their first real conversation happened by accident. A storm rolled in late one afternoon. The sky darkened early, rain pounding the windows like it was trying to get inside. Mara had stayed late to finish paperwork, and by the time she packed up, the center was nearly empty. She walked out to the parking lot and realized her tire was flat. She stared at it, disbelief rising. She was tired. She hated needing help. She checked her phone. Low battery. Of course. From behind her, a voice said, You stuck? Mara turned and saw Elias walking toward her, keys in hand. His work shirt was damp at the shoulders from the rain. My tire's flat, Mara said, trying to sound casual. Elias nodded. Got a spare? I think so. Pop the trunk. Mara did. And Elias moved with ease jack, lug wrench, spare tire. He worked without talking much, rain soaking his hair. Mara watched him, feeling something unfamiliar, the urge to trust. She didn't like it. You do this a lot? She asked, mostly to fill the silence. Elias tightened a bolt. Fixing things? Yeah. I meant helping people, she said. Elias paused just long enough that Mara could tell the question hit deeper than she intended. He returned to the tire. Depends, he said. Mara frowned. On what? Elias looked up then. Rain ran down his face, but his eyes were steady. On whether they want help, he said. Some people act like they do. Some people fight it. Mara's cheeks warmed. She felt seen in a way that made her nervous. I'm not fighting, she said. Elias gave a small, almost smile. You are. A little. Mara swallowed. Maybe I just don't like being a burden. Elias's hands stilled. For a second, his guard slipped and something older showed. Yeah, he said quietly. Me neither. They stood in the rain, a moment hanging between them like a bridge. Mara felt the urge to ask why. What happened to you? But she didn't, because she knew what it was like to have history sitting behind your eyes. Elias finished tightening the bolts and stood. You're good, he said. Drive slow. Mara stared at him. Thank you. Elias shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag. No problem. Then, before he could leave, Mara said, Do you want to get coffee sometime? As a thank you. The words surprised her as soon as they left her mouth. Elias looked just as surprised. He opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded once. Yeah, he said. Okay. Mara felt something in her chest shift, like a locked door had creaked open half an inch. An angel watched from the edge of the parking lot, unseen, and whispered back toward heaven. They're ready to begin. Their first coffee was awkward. Not because they didn't like each other, but because they were both used to hiding. Mara asked safe questions. Favorite movies? Music? Work schedule? Elias answered politely, cautiously. Elias asked about Mara's job. She spoke about programs and funding and community needs, keeping her words on the surface. They both avoided the deeper subjects like they were potholes. Still, there was something gentle between them, something that didn't demand. Mara noticed Elias always waited before answering, like he was measuring whether his words were safe. Elias noticed Mara smiled even when her hands were tense. When the coffee date ended, neither of them rushed to leave. Elias walked her to her car. The streetlights had come on, casting a soft glow on the sidewalk. Mara stared at her keys for a second, then said, "I didn't think I'd enjoy that." Elias nodded. "Me neither." They both laughed quietly. Then there was silence. Mara felt the old fear rise. If you let someone in, they'll hurt you. Elias felt his own fear. If you need someone, they'll leave. Mara broke the silence first. "Thank you again," she said. Elias nodded. "Anytime." He turned to go. Mara watched him walk away and whispered again, barely audible, "God, what are you doing?" This time, she felt the answer, not as words, but as warmth. Healing. Over the next few months, they kept meeting. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long conversations in parked cars where neither of them wanted the night to end. Still, there were moments when their pasts reached for them. One evening, Mara accidentally dropped a glass in her kitchen. It shattered loudly. She froze, heart racing. Elias, sitting at her table, stood instantly. His shoulders tensed, eyes scanning the room as if expecting danger. Mara stared at him, startled by his reaction. Elias realized what he'd done and forced himself to relax. "Sorry," he said quickly. "Loud noises. I don't know." Mara crouched to pick up the glass, hands shaking. Elias reached for her wrist gently. "Don't. You'll cut yourself." Mara flinched at the touch, not because it was rough, but because touch in her memory often came with fear. Elias froze, immediately letting go. "I'm sorry," he said again, voice low. "I didn't mean—" Mara swallowed hard. "No," she whispered. It's okay." They looked at each other, two people suddenly exposed, pasts bleeding into the present. Elias spoke quietly. "I'm not mad," Mara laughed once, shaky. "I know. My body doesn't always know." Elias nodded slowly, understanding more than he wanted to admit. "My body either," he said. They cleaned the glass together, carefully, patiently, like they were cleaning up something bigger than glass. When they finished, Mara sat on the couch, staring at the floor. Elias sat across from her, giving space. Mara took a breath. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. Elias nodded. "Yeah." Mara's voice was small. "My parents, they're still together. But it wasn't safe, growing up." Elias's expression softened. "I'm sorry," Mara swallowed. "I used to think love was supposed to hurt, or at least be scary." Elias stared at his hands. "I used to think love disappears," he said quietly. "Like it gets tired of you." Mara looked up. Elias hesitated, then spoke. "My parents," he said. "Drugs, violence, they didn't make it." Mara's eyes filled with tears immediately. Elias's jaw clenched. "I don't tell people that," he said. "Not usually." Mara's voice broke. "Thank you for telling me." They sat there in silence, the air thick with truth. Not the kind of truth that destroys, the kind that begins to heal. Mara reached for his hand slowly, giving him time to pull away if he needed. Elias let her. Their fingers intertwined like a quiet promise. Neither of them said "God" out loud, but both of them felt the sacredness of the moment. Faith entered their relationship, the way morning enters a dark room, slowly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't forced. It was small choices. Elias started praying again, not polished prayers, just honest ones. "God, help me not run when love gets close." Mara started praying too, not asking for perfection, just peace. "God, teach me what safe love feels like." They didn't pray together at first. That felt too intimate, too vulnerable. But sometimes, after a hard day, Elias would text her, "Praying for you." And Mara would reply, "Thank you, I need it." Those words became another kind of thread. Then came the test. It always does. One night, Mara and Elias were driving home from dinner when they got stuck at a red light near a gas station. A couple was arguing on the sidewalk. At first, it was just words. Then the man grabbed the woman's arm too hard. Mara's heart stopped. Her whole body went cold. Elias tensed instantly. The woman tried to pull away. The man jerked her back. Mara couldn't breathe. Her mind flashed to childhood, her mother's pleading, the slammed doors, the fear. Elias's mind flashed two different images: sirens, fights, blood on pavement, helplessness. The light turned green. Cars behind them honked. But Elias didn't move. He turned on his hazard lights and parked quickly. Mara grabbed his arm. Elias, don't. It's dangerous. Elias's jaw tightened. I can't just watch, he said. Mara's voice shook. I watched my whole childhood, she whispered, and nobody helped. Elias looked at her, then really looked. He saw the terror in her eyes, the child still inside her. He swallowed. Then he did something neither of them expected. He stayed in the car, not because he didn't care, because he chose her safety too. He pulled out his phone and called 911. His voice was steady. There's a domestic situation at the gas station on East Line. Man grabbed a woman. Please send someone. He hung up and looked at Mara. Mara was trembling. Elias reached for her hand slowly. You're safe, he said. I got you. Mara's breath hitched, and for the first time, she believed him. The police arrived within minutes. The couple separated. The woman walked away, shaking but alive. Mara stared out the window, tears sliding down her face silently. Elias squeezed her hand. You okay? Mara shook her head. No, she whispered. But thank you for not leaving me alone in it. Elias swallowed hard. I'm not leaving, he said. The words felt like a vow. He didn't know how much heaven had waited to hear them spoken from his mouth. That night, Mara cried in Elias's arms. Not neatly, not quietly. The kind of crying that comes from years of holding breath. Elias held her like he was learning how to hold something sacred. His own eyes burned, because he wasn't just holding Mara. He was holding the part of himself that had never been held when he was small. Mara's voice broke. I'm scared, she whispered. Elias rested his forehead against hers. Me too, he admitted. Mara looked at him. Then why are we doing this? Elias's voice was barely audible. Because I think this might be what God meant love to be. Mara's chest tightened. Safe, present, steady. She had never trusted love to be those things. But in Elias's arms, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Rest. Months passed. Healing wasn't linear. Some days they laughed easily. Some days they stumbled into old patterns, Mara shutting down, Elias going silent. But they learned to return to each other. They learned to apologize without excuses. They learned to say, that wasn't you, that was my past. They learned to name their triggers like you name storms so you can prepare. Elias started therapy. Mara did too. They didn't go to fix each other. They went because love deserved honesty. And somewhere in the quiet work of healing, faith grew. One Sunday, Mara invited Elias to sit with her at church instead of in the back row. Elias hesitated. You don't have to, Mara said. I'd like you near. Elias nodded. They sat together. When the choir sang, Mara closed her eyes. Elias stared at the lyrics on the screen, throat tight. The song said, He restores what was broken. Elias felt his chest ache. Mara reached for his hand. He held on. After service, an older couple approached them. You two look like you belong together, the woman said warmly. Mara laughed politely. Elias looked uncomfortable. The man smiled. God has a way of bringing people together who understand each other's wounds. Mara blinked, surprised. Elias swallowed. Yeah, Elias said quietly. He does. The night Elias proposed wasn't fancy. No big restaurant, no crowd, no cameras. Just a small park near the river where the city lights reflected on the water like scattered stars. They sat on a bench, sharing a warm drink. Mara leaned against Elias's shoulder. Do you ever think about how we met? She asked. Elias smiled slightly. You almost walked into my ladder. Mara laughed. I mean, beyond that. Elias was quiet for a moment. I think, he said slowly, God put us in the same place on purpose, because I would have stayed closed forever if I hadn't met you. Mara's eyes filled. I would have too, she admitted. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring box. His hand was steady, but his voice trembled. Mara, he said, I don't know how to be perfect, but I know how to stay. I know how to choose you. And I know God didn't bring us this far to let fear win. Mara covered her mouth, tears spilling. Elias opened the box. Will you marry me? He whispered. Mara nodded hard, laughing through tears. Yes, she said. Yes. Elias slipped the ring onto her finger with reverence, like it was holy. Mara leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. For a moment, neither of them spoke, because words were too small for what God had done, not by erasing their past, but by redeeming it. They married in a small church, simple and warm. Mara's mother cried quietly in the front row, grief and hope tangled together. Elias's sister stood beside him, eyes shining. Mr. Holland sat in the back, nodding like a man who had prayed for this. When Mara walked down the aisle, Elias's breath caught. He thought of the boy he used to be, the boy who had believed love would leave. He thought of his mother, lost to addiction, and whispered silently, I made it. I survived. God didn't waste my life. Mara reached him, and he took her hands. The pastor spoke about love being patient, kind, steady. Elias swallowed tears. Mara squeezed his fingers. When they said, I do, it didn't sound like a fairy tale. It sounded like healing. It sounded like victory. It sounded like God taking broken pieces and building something whole. Later that night, after the wedding ended and the guests left, Mara and Elias sat alone in their new home. The house was quiet. No shouting, no slamming doors, no fear waiting in corners. Mara took a slow breath. Elias looked at her. You okay? Mara smiled softly. I'm learning, she said. Elias nodded. Me too. They sat together for a moment, just listening to the quiet, letting it teach them that love could be safe. Mara leaned her head on his shoulder. Elias whispered a prayer, simple and raw. God, thank you. Mara closed her eyes and added quietly, thank you for bringing us to each other. In the unseen, angels watched not because marriage was the end of the story, but because it was the beginning of a new one. A story where love did not vanish. A story where love did not hurt. A story where love was steady enough to hold two wounded children who had grown into adults, still learning how to trust. God had brought them together not by accident, but by mercy. And now, whenever fear tried to visit, Mara and Elias would remember. They were not repeating their childhood. They were rewriting it, together, with God. If this story encouraged your heart or gave you a moment of peace, please take a moment to like this video and share it so more people can hear something hopeful today. And if you'd like to continue listening to stories that strengthen faith, bring comfort, and remind us that God is near, please subscribe to this channel. Your support helps these stories reach others who may need encouragement. Thank you for listening. May peace stay with you until we meet again.